Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. My name is Paul Harris and I'm president of the City Club's Board of Directors. I'm very pleased to introduce today's speaker, Betty Sutton, administrator of the St. Lawrence Seaway Development Corporation. Ms. Sutton is making a return appearance today to the City Club. By way of brief biographical background, she was born and raised in Barberton, Ohio, the youngest of 6 children. She attended public schools in Barberton and graduated from Kent State University. She then earned her law degree from the University of Akron. And after law school, Ms. Sutton practiced as a labor attorney and thereafter began a political career that included her election, I think at age 29, if I did the math right, to the Ohio House of Representatives. I read 28, but then I checked again. It looked like it was 29, so anyway. And then her career, of course, culminated in three terms as representative of Ohio's 13th Congressional District. Ms. Sutton's appeared here twice for debates, one in 2010 and one in 2012, and I think it's worth thanking her for her continuing years of public service. Today she will present the 3rd annual State of the Great Lakes Address, an annual forum that the City Club launched to focus attention on the Great Lakes, which collectively account for 1/5 of the world's freshwater surface at 6 quadrillion gallons and cover 95,160 square miles. We appreciate this wonderful natural resource perhaps even more today as we read and hear reports on impacts of the current drought in the western United States. We also know that this resource is a vital part of our region's commerce and economic vitality. Ms. Sutton was sworn in as the 10th administrator of the St. Lawrence Development Corporation on August 13, 2013. The corporation is a wholly owned government organization established in 1954 to, as stated at its website, quote, construct, operate, and maintain that part of the St. Lawrence Seaway between the Port of Montreal and Lake Erie, within the territorial limits of the United States, end quote. The Seaway spans 2,342 miles from the mouth of the Gulf of St. Lawrence at the Atlantic Ocean to the western end of Lake Superior at Duluth. In last year's State of the Great Lakes Address, Chris Koleski, director of the Great Lakes Program for the United States Environmental Protection Agency, discussed environmental concerns for the Great Lakes. Today, Ms. Sutton will discuss how the Seaway system furthers the dual objectives of economic development and environmental stewardship. After her formal remarks, she will answer questions as part of our traditional City Club question and answer period. So, please join me in welcoming Betty Sutton, administrator of the St. Lawrence Seaway Development Corporation, back to the City Club of Cleveland to present the 3rd annual State of the Great Lakes Address.
Thank you very much, Board President Paul Harris, for that very kind introduction. It's an honor for me to be here with you all today at the City Club. I want to thank the City Club not only for the invitation to join you to speak on the state of the Great Lakes, but also for providing this forum on an ongoing basis through the years. It's a very important opportunity for us to learn about the issues of the day, and I am honored to be a part of it. I want to welcome all of you who are here today in the audience and those who are listening and watching elsewhere. Thank you for your participation, for taking the time out to learn a little bit more about the St. Lawrence Seaway and the system that we work in. As someone who grew up here in Northeast Ohio, near the shores of Lake Erie, I have long had an appreciation for these magnificent waters and our region and what they have to offer us. So I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to join you here today as the administrator of the St. Lawrence Seaway Development Corporation, also called the SLSDC. You know, they love to use acronyms. I'm happy to be here to talk to you a little bit about the work that we do at the SLSDC and to offer a vision about how our magnificent Great Lakes, these vital resources, make our region poised to reach for greater prosperity and a bright future. You know, by any measure, economic, environmental, cultural, quality of life, or just plain old common decency. The Great Lakes region is a powerhouse that far too often does not get the kind of attention that it deserves. I, for one, think we need to change that, so I'm happy to be here. One thing that has always bothered me as a proud Ohioan is the way that some people refer to the Great Lakes region, this amazing part of the country, as the Rust Belt. Does that bother you? Not only is such a reference inherently negative, it does not come close to doing justice for our magnificent region, our communities, our citizens. How would the residents of the Southwest like it if we were to call them, I don't know, the Sunstroke Belt? Now, I don't think we should, because I don't think it would do them justice any more than calling this part of the country the Rust Belt does us justice. I don't think it suits us, and I think a much better name for this magnificent part of the country and our region is the Opportunity Belt. And maybe today I can convince some of you to believe that too. Now, I'm not the only one thinking of our area as ripe for opportunity. Last fall, Forbes magazine released its list of the best opportunity cities in the U.S. And guess what? The magnificent Great Lakes region, 8 of the 10 top slots were cities in the Great Lakes region. 12 of the 19 cities on the list are from the region, and 4 are from Ohio. So we have a lot to offer. And recognizing that we're connected by water, our challenge and our opportunity is to find ways to protect and responsibly use these vital resources for the good of our citizens, our communities, our region, and our nation. You've heard it before, but I'm going to say it again. Uniquely endowed with 1/5 of the world's fresh water and home to nearly 1/4 of the continent's population, the Great Lakes region is the 3rd largest economy in the world. It was mentioned earlier that it was the 4th largest economy in the world, and I'm happy to report that it just shifted. Not just this moment, but it was the 4th largest economy in the world before I started this job, but now it's the 3rd largest economy in the world. Just saying. And what that means is that if it were a country, as an economy, it would fall only behind the United States and China. We recently surpassed Japan, and that's how we got to the number 3 spot. The Great Lakes Seaway system directly serves this domestic powerhouse region, which accounts for 1/4 of U.S. gross domestic product, 1/2 of North America's manufacturing and service industries, and is home to 1/2 of the Fortune 500 industrial companies. As the administrator of the St. Lawrence Seaway Development Corporation, it won't surprise you that I look at the water as the key to the opportunity in our region. And certainly I look at the Great Lakes Seaway system as a transportation resource that is without equal in North America, let alone the world. And as the SLSDC administrator, I'm honored to be here to share with you information regarding the critical role that maritime commerce plays in our economy. The contributions of maritime commerce in the Great Lakes Seaway system has been underappreciated for far too long. But today, our waterway has never been more relevant. So exactly what is this waterway, and what is the St. Lawrence Seaway Development Corporation, and how does it impact you and our communities? How does it make a difference? Well, the SLSDC is a wholly owned government corporation that, as was indicated, operates and maintains the U.S. infrastructure and waters of the St. Lawrence Seaway while performing trade development and supporting economic activity in the Great Lakes Seaway region. To provide a bit of history, the SLS, the St. Lawrence Seaway, was created by an exchange of diplomatic notes between the U.S. and Canada that had the equivalency of a treaty in 1954. In 1954, the role of the administrator as a champion for the economic development of the area was also created through the passage of the Wiley-Dondero Act, and lock construction on the Seaway began. It was considered an engineering marvel and the joint U.S.-Canadian Seaway navigation project linking the Great Lakes region to global markets was completed in 1959. Upon completion, 15 U.S. and Canadian locks became operational. Filled and emptied by gravity, this spectacular lift system raises vessels 180 meters above the sea level and bypasses Niagara Falls. The mission of the SLSDC to operate and maintain the U.S. infrastructure and to provide a safe, secure, reliable, efficient, deep draft waterway and to promote trade and economic activity in the Great Lakes region is quite a mission, and it's one we take seriously. The system is a binational waterway, and we work directly and closely with our Canadian counterparts at the St. Lawrence Seaway Management Corporation to provide those transiting the Seaway with a seamless experience, which is pretty important because when a ship travels down the St. Lawrence River from Montreal to Lake Erie, they pass over the international border 27 times, making binational cooperation and effective leadership a necessity. We work together 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with our Canadian counterparts, and the high degree of operational and promotional cross-border interaction that has developed is truly remarkable given the complexities and the multiple jurisdictions impacting the transit experience for Seaway users. If you think about it, we're talking about 2 nations, 8 Great Lakes states, 2 Canadian provinces, many local communities, tribal lands, so making the governance of this important body of water in the system work is quite a task. All other U.S. inland waterways are operated and maintained directly by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the U.S. Coast Guard. I'm honored to have Admiral June Ryan of the 9th District Coast Guard here with us today. I've had the chance to work with her. The Coast Guard is one of our partners. We work closely together, and I know that she is offering exceptional leadership as the commander of the 9th District. The St. Lawrence Seaway Development Corporation is a nimble governmental entity with a large international responsibility that has a direct and long-lasting impact on the citizens of both the U.S. and Canada. We're headquartered in Washington, D.C. with operations in Messina, New York, where our very capable personnel operate 2 locks, the Eisenhower and Snell locks. With our Canadian partners, we deliver the mission on providing a safe, efficient, reliable waterway. As a government corporation, we've been endowed with an array of legal authorities that distinguish us a bit from other operating modes at U.S. DOT and from most other executive agencies. We have the capacity, for example, to own property, and we work to promote greater utilization of the system, but we're also able to act quickly and directly with Canada to fulfill our mission. You can see that the Great Lakes system extends from the Gulf of the St. Lawrence at the Atlantic Ocean to the twin ports of Duluth Superior, providing direct access to more than 30 ports, including the port of Cleveland, the port of Toledo, ports of Lorraine, Ashtabula, Montreal, Duluth, there are Chicago, just to name a few. Working with stakeholders, including industry trade associations like the Lake Carriers Associations, our ports, labor, local, state, federal, and tribal officials, and business leaders, manufacturers, environmental NGOs, sister agencies, the EPA, the Army Corps, the Coast Guard, we at SLSDC are committed to collaboration. We know that it's critical that we provide not only a reliable system, but we do it in an environmentally responsible way. It's vital for our economy, and it's vital for the environmental well-being of our area. As administrator, I communicate this beyond the region, because people just don't know enough about what we do. They don't always see the direct connection between what ships carry and how it impacts their lives. They need to understand how the dedicated men and women of the St. Lawrence Seaway Development Corporation and the Coast Guard and all of those at our ports and work together to see that that bowl of cereal they eat in the morning, how it ends up at their breakfast table. Shipping is sometimes an invisible industry. It puts food on the plate, it puts clothes on your back, and it does so much more to affect people's daily lives, but we often don't think about it. One time that I think you will think about it, now that I'm going to bring it up, is when those winter months roll around and we need that salt on the roads. We might not think much about how that salt came to be there, but there's a good chance it transited in the Great Lakes Seaway system, and if it wasn't there, we would really miss it. So next time when you're out there appreciating that the salt has effectively been put on the roads, remember that shipping helped to make that possible. So we have a good story to tell. Our message is clear. Maritime transportation is the most fuel-efficient, cost-effective, and environmentally friendly way to move goods, I would submit. And furthermore, the economic impact of Great Lakes Seaway shipping is extremely important to the vitality of this region. Let me provide you some facts. According to the October 2011 study, Economic Impacts of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway System, shipping on the Great Lakes is one of the key drivers of the U.S. and Canadian economies. 227,000 jobs are created by shipping on the Great Lakes. $35 billion in business revenue is generated by the maritime industry on the lakes. $14 billion in annual personal income is garnered in the United States and Canada. $5 billion in federal, state, and provincial and local tax revenues are added every year. And $3.6 billion in cost savings are realized for businesses using the maritime mode when compared to alternative modes of transportation. So we want to work with our ports and other stakeholders to help grow the utilization of the system. More growth means more jobs. Last year, trade on the Great Lakes and in the system was up by 7%, which again is good for the economy and good for the area. I say this all to make a point. Can there be any doubt about the magnitude of the importance of the maritime industry and the tremendous impact of our ports and our labor port force? Well, if that's not enough to make the case, let's take a moment and look at the environmental performance of maritime. Maritime moves cargo cheaper, greener, and faster, often carrying vast amounts of cargo long distances and using significantly less fuel than both trains and trucks. According to a January 2013 study, Environmental and Social Impacts of Marine Transport in the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway region, with respect to Seaway Great Lakes shipping, the Seaway-sized fleet is 24% more fuel efficient than rail and 531% more fuel efficient than truck. Ships also have the smallest carbon footprint compared to trucks and trains. Rail and trucks would emit 19% and 533% more greenhouse gas emissions, respectively, if the three modes carried the same cargo the same distance. So from a capacity standpoint, one Seaway-sized vessel can carry the same amount of goods as 301 rail cars or 963 trucks in a single trip. Think about that in terms of our already overcrowded highways. And from a safety standpoint, the marine mode has a very good record. The question is, how are goods going to move? Because they're going to move. And moving them safely and efficiently on water is often the best alternative. Now, I know that as the administrator of the Seaway, I'm interested in commerce. But I also come to this job as an environmentalist. And as the administrator of the SLSDC, safety is a paramount concern. We want the benefits of robust marine commerce, including jobs, but we know that it must be done in a safe and environmentally conscious way. Compared to other ways of transporting goods, shipping is the absolute clear leader in terms of public safety. The best way to avoid a problem is to prevent it, and we do everything possible that we can to prevent things from going wrong. With respect to our environmental sustainability efforts, here's what we do at the Seaway to combat those invasive species that we are all so very, very concerned about. Every international ship that comes into the Great Lakes through the Seaway receives a ballast tank exam before it enters the system. There is close coordination among inspectors from the U.S. Coast Guard, Transport Canada, and two Seaway organizations. We began this type of inspection regime back in 2006. And since 2006, we have not seen any new invasive species identified coming through the Seaway. Now, I know you're all thinking, well, what about those carp, right? That's what I always think. What about those carp? Well, the carp did not come through the Seaway. They came from the Mississippi Basin and are traveling in the other direction. But as administrator of the SLSDC, I would just offer this. As we inspect these tanks, we sample them for salinity and the presence of mud to determine if a satisfactory management practice was employed. And when we find water was not in compliance, it's sealed in the ballast tank and re-examined upon the vessel's exit of the system. We can and we have issued fines up to $36,625 per occurrence for noncompliance. And as I said, the 2013 navigation season marked the 5th consecutive year that 100% of the ballast tanks entering the Great Lakes via the St. Lawrence Seaway were examined. Last year marked year number 6. It's a highly effective inspection program, as I said, with no new detections being determined through the Seaway since 2006 when the program was implemented. So with respect to other areas and other threats to the Seaway through ballast water and through invasive species, we're making progress, and I would encourage that action makes a difference. And so hopefully actions that are being taken and contemplated to deal with the problem of the Asian carp will likewise be put in place and help us to prevent the calamity that could occur with their introduction into these very precious waters. Beyond ballast water, the ballast water inspection regime, we also are host to a ballast water collaborative which brings together stakeholders, people who have an interest in preserving our waterway, not only today, but for years to come. And we organize that so that people would have a forum to come, raise their issues, and we could find ways to address these challenges that are before us in a manner that would produce mutually beneficial outcomes and allow us to accomplish multiple goals at one time. It's not just about jobs, and it's not just about the environment, it's about jobs and the environment. And we are capable of doing both things well. And when we do things well, we are all better served. I'm happy to report that, as I said, trade is up last year by 7%. And I want to just take a moment and make a reference to something that's happening right here in Cleveland that has helped us lift those trade numbers. At the Port of Cleveland last year, working through one of the programs that the St. Lawrence Seaway Development Corporation has a marketing program called Highway H2O, which we do in conjunction with our Canadian counterparts. The Port of Cleveland instituted a liner service with direct service from Antwerp to Cleveland. It was a monthly service when it started out last year, adding cargo, a combination cargo ship carrying containers as well as bulk and break bulk commodities. And I'm happy to report that not only did that service take off last year, this year another ship has been added, making it a bi-monthly service, and that ships are also adding calls to other ports within the system. So why is that important? It's important because it's important that those of you in this room know that we have dynamic leadership at the Port of Cleveland that not only benefits this area, but benefits the system and our region as a whole. It's important also because it is getting folks out there on the commercial side to take a new look at this region and that tremendous market that I referenced in the beginning. So I greatly commend the Port of Cleveland. Will Friedman is with us here today, and I look forward to continuing our work with this port as well as other ports throughout the system to help them maximize the economic advantages and opportunities before them. To that end, we have at the SLSDC an outreach program an initiative that has put somebody on the ground here in Cleveland who works throughout the system with our partners, like our ports, like our industry representatives, to help us realize the opportunities before us and overcome the challenges that we have as a system. This is an exciting and dynamic time for the Seaway system in the Great Lakes region, and it's absolutely the right time to bring a new focus to the economic development role. You heard some discussion earlier about the magnitude of the endowment we have in the Great Lakes. But I would like, as I wrap up in conclusion, to just share with you a couple of passing thoughts as well as some quotes that I think sum up what we have in these magnificent waters. And I would begin by saying that this speech is called The State of the Great Lakes, and I would say that the state of the Great Lakes and the state of our region is full of promise. No other region in North America and perhaps the world possesses the economic and environmental assets of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway system. A quote from the May 2013 Bank of Montreal Special Report reads this way: "The Great Lakes region boasts a massive geographic footprint and is a major driver of the North American economy. With economic output of $4.7 trillion in 2011, the region accounts for 28% of combined U.S. and economic activity. By comparison, the region's output ranks ahead of Germany, France, Brazil, and the United Kingdom. And it would rank as, this says the fourth, but we know it's the third, fourth largest economy in the world if it were a country, behind only the U.S., China, and Japan. Quite simply, the economic importance of the region can't be overstated." Now, the second thing I want to read to you is, according to the Great Lakes Information Network, a quote that says, 6 quadrillion gallons of fresh water, 1/5 of the world's fresh surface water, 95% of the U.S. supply, 84% of the surface water supply in North America. Spread evenly across the continental U.S., the Great Lakes would submerge the country under about 9.5 feet of water. This quote doesn't even begin to describe the ecological diversiveness and richness of our region. Now, these facts never get old and they need repeating. The Great Lakes region is like no other on the planet, uniquely blessed with ecological riches and economic might. We must not lose sight of the importance of simultaneously achieving economic and environmental objectives, increasing the economic output and the jobs created in the region, as well as improving and preserving the ecological quality of the region. It's not one or the other. It's both. They're not mutually exclusive goals, and ultimately, we cannot afford to achieve one goal without the other. To frame the question as having to choose one or the other is a false choice, which diminishes our ability to focus on the more relevant, sometimes difficult question, and potentially more successful choices that confront us. Our collective challenge is to bring forward conversations and ideas and outcomes that maximize both of these tremendous assets. The Seaway, as the maritime gatekeeper to the Great Lakes region, is uniquely situated to play an important role in the development of these ideas and these outcomes, and I, as the administrator, and we as an agency look forward to doing so as we search for ways to reach multiple goals and those opportunities that abound here in North America's Opportunity Belt. Thank you.
Well, today we are enjoying a Friday Forum and the third annual State of the Great Lakes Forum featuring Betty Sutton, Administrator of the St. Lawrence Seaway Development Corporation, or SLSDC. We're going to return to her in a moment for our traditional City Club question and answer period, and would ask you to start formulating your questions now and try to keep them short and to the point. If you're joining us live on WCPN or our webcast and would like to tweet a question, then you can tweet it at the City Club. We welcome all of you here and those joining us via radio broadcast and web stream provided by our primary media partner, 90.3 WCPN, WVIZ, PBS, 104.9 WCLV Idea Stream, or one of the many radio stations across the country that carry City Club programs. Television, radio, and web production and distribution is made possible by Cleveland State University and PNC. Please be sure to join us on Friday, July 24, 1 week from today, as we welcome Catherine Spiller, Executive Director of the Feminist Majority Foundation, for a conversation on how female police officers can be a tool in the reduction of police brutality. And for more information about our upcoming and past forums, please visit us online. We're at cityclub.org. Today's forum is part of our Year of Clean Water series sponsored by the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District. We thank you for your support. Our community partner for today's program is the Cleveland Water Alliance, and we thank you for your support. And today's forum is the Aaron H. and Ruth S. Zychek Memorial Forum, made possible by a generous gift from the estate of Aaron and Ruth Zychek, and we thank you for your support as well. And additionally, we welcome guests at tables hosted by the Lake Carriers Association and the Port of Cleveland, and we thank you for, so a lot of thank yous here. And again, thank you for joining us today. As promised, we're going to return now to our presenter, Betty, for our traditional question and answer period. We welcome questions from everyone here today, including guests. Holding our microphones today are Director of Programming, Stephanie Jansky, and City Club member, do we have another person holding a mic? All right, Elizabeth Falco, wherever she is, okay. There she is, all right. First question, please.
Welcome back to the City Club.
Thank you.
My question has to do with the really long-term aspect of the Seaway. Is there any thought of remodeling it to permit the larger ocean-going cargo ships to enter the Great Lakes?
There are no immediate plans in the offing to expand the footprint of the Seaway. We are currently in the midst of an asset renewal program, a multi-year asset renewal program, the first that has taken place since the Seaway is originally constructed, in which we are not only rehabilitating but modernizing the Seaway, putting in some new technology. The Seaway has been a leader in innovation and technology. One of the things that is part of the asset renewal program that we are developing is something called hands-free mooring, a technology that will increase safety as the ships pass through, both for the workers and for the ship. And so one of the facts that I would share is that the Seaway could actually add more capacity in terms of utilization, up to 50% more, without costing any additional money. So when we get that capacity filled up, then maybe we can talk about doing something else. But I don't see that happening, and certainly there are no plans to that effect.
Based on the anticipated changes in the Great Lakes region due to global climate change, how do you anticipate the changes in the use of the St. Lawrence Seaway and also the administration of it? What plans are you making to address those anticipated changes?
Well, I think that there are a number of dimensions to that question and, frankly, to the answer. Certainly, there are a lot of implications with changes to the climate, including changes in water levels and just, frankly, the very fragile nature of the ecological system that is the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence River Seaway Basin. So the Seaway and working with partners, working with other agencies like the Environmental Protection Agency, has to have the flexibility to make sure we can do the right things in the right time. So right now, as you might imagine, in the last few winters, we've had quite a lot of ice. So we have water levels that are high. That is not always the case, and it won't always be the case. So we are, that is also part of why being a government-owned corporation with flexibilities is very important, because it gives us the opportunity to take actions that make sense in real time given the conditions that we find. You know, it will be very important going forward to maintain those flexibilities so that we can ensure not only that navigation can continue, but that it does so in a safe, environmentally responsible way. So that flexibility is, frankly, perhaps the most important piece moving forward.
Ms. Sutton, I compliment you on the smoothness with which the whole shipping phenomenon seems to be managed. And I think you'll find that for a layperson like me, the curiosity has more to do with the environmental side. When my fishmonger, it's Heinen's, funny to call him a fishmonger, but when they sell me yellow pike, they make a big point of saying it's from Canada, not from the United States. I don't even know why I should be wary of yellow pike coming from our side of the lake, but there's something happening here which isn't quite right. What is underway to try to make the waters of our side of the lake so clean that people will begin boasting it's from our side, not their side?
Well, I think that, you know, water is a flowing, has a flowing dynamic, shall we say? And I'm not sure about the reason why somebody would say that and make that distinction. I think the Seaway is a good example of how we can work effectively together with our Canadian counterparts, because it's essential that we do so. It could be that part of why they draw distinctions is there are some cross-border regulations in other areas of the government, including through the FDA and other regulatory regimes that exist for the protection of people, that may have standards that are slightly differing. But if I understand truly the root of your question is about concern for the environmental health of the lakes, as well as those creatures that live in the lakes and that you may consume on occasion. That is, in my view, an ever-present consideration, and it's something that requires constant vigilance in every action, frankly, that we take, and can never be a separate part of the consciousness of whether it's the operation of the Seaway or any governmental agency or regime. So, you know, I guess it has to be a way of life that we care about what we do in navigation and how that impacts the environmental quality of this water. We simply cannot afford to not get that right. We have 1/5 of the world's fresh water. That freshwater resource is, as I say, and I heard here other speakers say, a tremendous opportunity, but it's also a tremendous responsibility. And so we're very conscious of that in everything that we do.
Ms. Sutton, welcome, and to the area I like to refer to as the freshwater belt or the freshwater coast, which I'd encourage you to use. But I was going to ask you a question about invasive species, yes. But you've addressed that somewhat, but it occurred to me it related to the other question I have too, okay. Which is that most of the shipping today, or much of the shipping, is on container ships, on Panamax, and about to be new Panamax. And here in the Great Lakes, we have a little problem that we're not going to accommodate in our connecting channels or locks in our ports 65-foot deep draft ships. So what are we doing that maybe separates the salties and their invasive species from the St. Lawrence Seaway system, What are the Development Corporation and your Canadian partners doing that might promote some of the short sea shipping or some of the other alternatives that'll fit through our locks, that'll fit up our rivers and so forth?
Well, that is a big question, and I wish I had jotted it down along the way because I want to address every bit of it. First and foremost, the freshwater coast is in the Opportunity Belt, so we don't have to pick. They are both good, and I think we should use them both to make the point. With respect to invasive species, as I said, one of the things that we are doing is we have an inspection regime that is in conjunction with the U.S. and Canadian Coast Guards and the Canadian Management Corporation that has proven highly effective. We have seen no new invasive species coming through the Seaway since 2006. It does not mean that we can rest. It does not mean that we should ever let up, but we should continue to be vigilant. And we continue to offer and work with others to develop further ways that we might minimize or prevent. Prevent is what we want. We want to prevent the introduction of invasive species into the water. As to the question, and it sort of relates to the question we had earlier about the size of the Seaway and what we can and we cannot do. There is no doubt that we're not going to have Panamax vessels coming through the Seaway. We could not do that. Our geographical hindrances will not allow that. That said, part of what we do at the SLSDC is we work with our ports. The ports on the system, and for those of you who are in the room, you can see the system, and those little red dots are ports all through the system. They're different, and every one of them has merits. And part of what we at the SLSDC do is we work to help them in any way we can maximize those merits and capitalize on what they have to offer. The Port of Cleveland-Cuyahoga County is a good example. The liner service that this port had the vision and the initiative to implement going to and from Europe does hold containers. It carries containers as well as other cargo, and it's proving to be a vital addition to the Great Lakes Seaway system trade. So there are other ports on the system that perhaps that combination, that type of service might not be as workable for, but that port would have something else to offer. There are some ports that the port at Burns Harbor in Indiana, which is very steel intensive, for example. So what they are moving is going to be something different. We move a lot of grain out of the ports on the other end of the system in Duluth, Superior area, for example. So it really is about figuring out what it is our ports have to add value to and to work with them to help them grab and maximize that potential. As for short sea shipping, you brought up. Short sea shipping would be shipping that a lot of people call short sea shipping, use that term and mean different things. But let's just say that if short sea shipping were, for example, instead of trucks being lined up on a bridge between the U.S. and Canada, perhaps some of that could be taken right across the water and reducing congestion, reducing emissions. We stand ready, and we are having discussions with folks, as we always do, trying to find ways to open those doors and open those possibilities up to see if it makes sense. Because as I indicated before, goods are going to move. The question is, how should they move? How can they move safely? How can they move efficiently? How can they, what conscious choice do we want to make to move things from here to there that we need for quality of life in our communities? So I think short sea shipping has a lot of potential. There are challenges that make it difficult. Again, border challenges. There are custom and border issues that have to be dealt with. One of the ways that we have currently addressed, we have cruise ships that come in to the system. This is going to be a busy year. If the scheduled cruises coming into the lake are any indication, we at the Seaway have worked with the Coast Guard and with the Border Patrol agency to get a special kind of screening that makes it possible for those ships, once they're in the system and in the lakes, to move from from country to country without having to go through the extensive process that they might otherwise have to go through. So there are ways that we can come up with solutions to these challenges and reach for those opportunities. And that is exactly the kind of work that we at the corporation do with our partners as they are busy identifying those new ways to grab for that potential.
The question's been asked about increasing capacity.
Yes.
A finite amount of water flows from Lake Erie to Lake Ontario, which is allocated between power generation, the Welland Canal, and tourism. Can you increase capacity with the existing water allocation to the Welland Canal?
We are governed by the Boundary Waters Treaty of 1909. In the Boundary Waters Treaty, water levels are regulated. That sets out a framework for the regulation of water levels and increases. And one of the way that works is the number one use, the number one protected use for water levels is sanitation and health, right? Public health. The number two in the order of precedence is commercial navigation. And so that treaty is in effect. And so that does guide the process by which we make decisions on what kind of water is released. But your point is well taken. There are multiple uses of the water, and we have to make sure that they are all done in a responsible way. It might have been mentioned, I think, that I, before having the privilege to serve in this job, was honored to be a congresswoman from this area. One of the things that I worked on and was proud to lead the floor debate on was the Great Lakes Compact, which I think is a testament to our ability to come together with diverse interests and come up with a collaborative solution to govern the multiple uses of the water, to make sure that it is protected not only for today, but for the future. With that in mind, we do have guidelines in place that allow us to make those kinds of judgments in the moment. But it does go to another question that we heard earlier, that these things are fluid. I mean, literally, the water. I don't try to do these water metaphors. It just happens. But these things are fluid, and because they change, we have to have that flexibility, but also that ongoing and relentless commitment to do things in a responsible way.
Nice to see you again here at the City Club. Isn't it true that you spoke a little bit about the amount of ice that we have in the Seaway, and how has either the perception or the truth that it's closed a certain number of months in the year affected our competitiveness with the coast and our ability to really attract business? And is that a problem? And how long are they closed? And how does that affect trade?
Well, thank you very much for that question. Certainly, the Seaway is generally, the season runs from mid to late March through the end of December. That is when the Seaway is usually open for transit. Obviously, we have winters here that make transit beyond that not possible. It wouldn't be good for the environment, would not be good for safety, just could not happen properly. Because of the changing dynamics of winter months, we maintain some flexibility, and we have a series of considerations we look at when we make the decision, including how many assets are available, Coast Guard assets, Admiral. And the Coast Guard is always our great friend there, to make sure that we can have commerce flowing in a safe, efficient, reliable way. So as for competitiveness, it does make us different, but I would argue this, that every transportation route has its benefits and it has its challenges. And just like manufacturers who sometimes plan ahead, it's a management practice, they shut down perhaps for certain parts of the year, so too many of the users of this system are able to manage the commodities that they move through the system in a similar way. So the time that the Seaway is closed also allows for us to do our winter work. So when people are thinking that the Seaway is sleeping, the Seaway is not sleeping, I assure you. It is, our folks are out there working diligently to maintain and improve the infrastructure that exists there so that when shipping begins again, it will be even more efficient and effective. So I hope I answered your question. We don't compete really with the same commodities. I think that, you know, we again, I will add this exclamation point. I was recently at an event with a Great Lakes region mayor who I will keep nameless, but and he was talking about, Dan Walthrop is disappointed, and he was talking about, you may be able to identify him from my commentary. He was talking about how he was on his way after the event at which we met to open a groundbreaking ceremony for a business that was locating to this area which he represented. And he was telling the story about how that business came to be there. And he was saying how his community and a community in Texas were competing for this headquarters to be in the community, and they were going back and forth, and you know, one was offering this to the company, and then this mayor would come back and he came with this package, and they were going, and finally the mayor said to the person with whom he was negotiating, you know, it's okay, you go ahead, go to Texas or wherever that one, maybe it wasn't Texas, I think it was Texas, but I don't know. But in 3 years, you're going to be knocking on our door to take a shower. And we're going to let you in, but it's going to cost you. That's exactly what he said. So anyways, it was very colorful commentary from the mayor. But the point is, we have 1/5 of the world's fresh water. And a lot of folks don't have that vital resource. Now, I think it's really important that water is not looked at as a commodity to be bought and sold at all, but a resource to be carefully and responsibly used, and which can be used in multiple ways, but must always be protected and preserved. That's what we have to offer in the Great Lakes. So it's not just the water. It's the water that can bring others to this opportunity belt on the freshwater coast of North America.
What a way to begin my comment, from the macro to the micro. Okay. I'm a very proud Ohio resident.
Yes.
I love the state. When I travel around the world, I always seem to meet people from Ohio. Now look at the map. Of all the lakes you have, notice the red dots more on Lake Erie than any other lake? Jonathan Swift said that the definition of innovation is the art of seeing the invisible. I already believe very strongly that let's get out of the medieval system, that these are not individual dukes and duchesses in different places, because the latitude of Cleveland and Toledo is 43 degrees, and Nice, France is 41 degrees. How can we have a kind of Riviera in France on the Mediterranean and have a Riviera on Lake Erie? Who has Cedar Point? Who has the Cleveland Orchestra? Who has the Cleveland Museum? What an opportunity to create the Lake Erie necklace, a destination that from around the world. Have you been to Ohio lately? I really believe we're sitting on our butts, not maybe worrying about the movement of the water, but what can we develop on a container? What holds the water? What is that shoreline that gives such opportunity that we should use our creative minds, our intellect, and create something very, very exciting?
Well, I second that. I think that is well put in that we have a gem like no other. And I think that we need to, people always talk about thinking outside the box. Exactly. I keep getting confused. Why do they keep trying to put us in a box? Where there is no box, right? There is no box. And the truth of the matter is that's why I think of this as the Opportunity Belt. The water is what binds us as a region. The water is an amazing, amazing resource in multiple directions, including tourism, including, as I say, not only for cruise ships, but for destinations. We are a tremendous area, and that is, I will end where I began because I know I'm about to close. I will end where I began. For all of the reasons that we have discussed here today, the term Rust Belt should be out of our lexicon, and the term Opportunity Belt, home to the fresh coast of North America, should be embraced, and we should start thinking about not what we can't do, but what we can do. So thank you all very much.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we have been truly enjoying a special forum featuring Betty Sutton, Administrator of the St. Lawrence Seaway Development Corporation. Thank you for returning to the City Club. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This forum is now adjourned.